This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. So much of your personal info is out of your control, like your insurance provider that has your social security number and your favorite retailer that has your payment details. If they get breached, your information, your identity, is vulnerable. That's why LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Today on CityCast Boise. For the first time in over 3 decades, the Idaho Democratic Party is running a candidate in every district in the state. We're digging into why they think this strategy is a viable way to try and bring balance to our legislature and whether these candidates actually have a shot of flipping legislative seats. It's Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me today is Representative Lauren Necochea, House Assistant Democratic Leader, Representative for District 19, and Chair of the Idaho Democratic Party. Thanks for being here, Lauren.
It's my pleasure, Lindsay.
This election, there's a Democratic candidate running in every district in Idaho. That hasn't happened in more than 30 years. So how is morale among these candidates?
It has been so fun to see some of these candidates just find the joy in running for office and, encounter voters in their districts who haven't had a Democrat actively run before and who are really excited to have a choice other than the tired Republican leadership that takes everything for granted, that always looks over their shoulder to the right to see if someone's going to out conservative or out extreme them.
And it's been 30 years since we've seen this. So what happened this year? What was different this year that you were able to get a candidate in every district?
Yeah, I'll say the easily accessible data run back to 1991 as far as when the last time this is. So it could be much further back. We just don't know. We don't know when the last time is that a Democrat has run in every district from what we can see easily. What really happened was we put a stake in the ground as the Idaho Democratic Party, and we said it on record in an interview with a reporter about our goals and what we were doing. And then we got to work, and we used texting and phone calls, and we looked into who were the local community leaders who are Democrats, and we just kept asking people to run until we met the goal. And what laid the groundwork for this was that the year prior, we had put a stake in the ground about organizing every county so that every county in the state of Idaho would have a county Democratic Party chair. And some of those chairs, in turn, got interested in running for office.
How difficult was it to find candidates all over the state, especially maybe I'm wondering in some of the really rural, deeply red parts of the state?
It was a challenge at first, and I sometimes tell the story of Clark County, which is a very small county, about 1,000 people, way over out east. And when it came time to find a county chair for that party, we had only, less than a couple dozen registered Democrats in the county. Very few had phone numbers. And so what happened is our organizer, Anthony, got in the car, drove over there, started knocking on doors and talking to the Democrats. And then they started getting together. Maybe less than a few months, the Dubois Rodeo Parade, that's the main town there, had a float for the Clark County Democrats. And what happened was that friends and neighbors said, "Oh, you're a Democrat too. Oh, let's get together." So getting on the phone and sometimes getting in the car, getting out there and talking to the Democrats we know. And then we find that when they want to get together and are finding just solidarity and community with each other.
Were a lot of these candidates already politically involved in their communities, or are some of them running for the first time? This is the first time they've been involved politically or campaigning.
It's a mix. I think about Joseph Messerly, who was running a food truck with his wife. He's a young 20-something guy out in Soda Springs. And the real turning point for him is that his mother is a librarian. And when the legislature started going after librarians, a couple years ago, it was the bill to jail librarians for up to 6 months over controversial materials. And then, of course, the bill that was actually enacted this year has a different mechanism, and it has bounties and cash rewards for the book banners who want to sue their libraries. But that was really galvanizing for this young man who had kind of watched the legislature slip into extremism, but then you start threatening to jail someone's mom, and they really take notice. And the running for office is the way that these candidates are saying what's happening in Idaho is not okay, and I'm not just going to sit here and let it happen.
And speaking of campaigning, I'm really curious because this year you aren't running for a re-election. What led to that decision?
It really came down to the fact that my time serving as chair of the Idaho Democratic Party is so rewarding, and it's so critical that we gain ground and elect more Democrats. And that's the main lesson I've learned serving in the Idaho legislature for 5 years. Just every day going down there, seeing that, the good things that happen often happen only because of Democrats. So just having that front row seat to the chaos and the extremism made it feel much more important to me to get more Democrats into that building and to make the Democrats more competitive statewide. We need someone, and this is why it's also so important that we have all these people running, but we need somebody at the candidate community forum who's going to take the Republicans to task about voting to jail librarians, about passing an abortion ban that's so extreme. We've lost 22% of our OB-GYNs and more than half of our maternal and fetal medicine specialists. These Republican politicians just can get away with stuff if there's no one there calling them on it. And so that feels like just the most important mission in Idaho right now, to improve our politics and restore balance. And that to me is much more important than running my own race. I didn't want to be distracted by running my own race.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means. It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop Black Friday week starting November 21st.
Okay, Lauren, getting candidates to run is one particular challenge in Idaho, but winning an election takes money and resources. What kind of funding and support was available for these candidates who are running outside of the Democratic stronghold districts?
So we, as a state party, we don't cut checks to individual candidates. We support them with in-kind resources. We do that by promoting absentee voting, placing digital ads, and doing other mail to get every Democrat in the state out to the polls. And then we have, for the first time this cycle, one staffer who's totally dedicated to just supporting our candidates, training them on how to use data, training them on how to knock on doors, making sure they know about the different candidate surveys that they need to respond to. We held a candidate summit back in March as all these candidates were filing and getting ready to file to run, where we had them come to Boise and then trained them in how to be a candidate.
And I'm curious, I know, the election it's not over, but have you gotten any feedback from these candidates that this felt very doable? They felt supported. What's kind of the feedback you're getting, especially from some people who are running the first time?
Yeah, this question brings to mind Jody Keeler over in Washington County or Weiser. She has a steep hill to climb. It's a tough district for a Democrat. And she was talking to me just about how much fun she's having. And she's getting out in her community and learning about the community's needs better, and getting out and talking to voters who are excited to have a choice and excited to have someone who cares to hear from them in November. I think Republicans think that their job is done in the primary, and then they stop campaigning. And so we're doing that work.
And this year, the National Democratic Party gave the state party $70,000 to build up support, particularly among the Nez Perce and Hispanic voters of the state. How were these funds used, and what was different this year? Because it seems like the National Democratic Party kind of ignores Idaho a little bit. So what was different this year?
I think there are two things that are notable. One, I think, the DNC wisely sees that we need to elect Democrats everywhere. And the Republican extremism in Idaho is so out of control that it's hurting people. Women are being life flighted out of the state for emergency pregnancy complications, to just give one example. And then we have rural libraries that are closing their doors to kids. The extremism is diminishing opportunity for Idahoans. So I think they realize the importance of electing more Democrats in these deep red states because people are getting hurt by this single party rule. The other piece that's happening is that in Idaho, the Idaho Democratic Party is just getting stronger and stronger with every day. We are outraising the Idaho Republican Party. We are on track to have a $1.9 million budget this year, which 5 years ago, our budget was $300,000. So when the DNC sees that our team has the ability to execute big goals, like recruiting a candidate to run in every legislative district, like getting a county chair in place in every county, then they're inspired to invest in us.
And there was an incident with Democratic candidate Trish Carter Goodhart earlier this fall, where a Republican candidate at a forum allegedly screamed at her that he was, quote, sick of her liberal bullshit and she should go back where she's from, end quote. And Trish Carter Goodhart is Nez Perce, and I'm sure that incident was incredibly upsetting. I can only imagine. How is the Democratic Party supporting candidates throughout the state who face additional risks, not necessarily experienced by straight, cis, white candidates?
Yeah, the overt racism in his comments were harrowing for those who were part of that event. I know our executive director had a call the next day with our candidates who were there, and it truly was a traumatic moment. They were stunned the way he stormed out the door, and then they were looking at the door the whole rest of the forum, worried he was going to storm back in and, perhaps commit an act of violence because he was so unhinged and out of control. And what we try to do as a party is follow Trish's lead and follow the lead of the Nez Perce tribe. And so we connected Trish to reporters and let her be the face of and telling her story because she wanted to, and she did so ably. And then when we saw the Nez Perce tribe statement, which is really a beautiful statement, that I feel like the Nez Perce tribe had every right to just be angry and end of story. And what they chose to do was, denounce the hateful racist remarks, but also talk about how our diversity is our strength and that they want people of every racial and ethnic background in Idaho to succeed. And the opening words of their statement were, "We're all from here." And so we wanted to amplify that. And so we designed a set of signs and distributed up in that area so that they could, if they wanted to, kind of express kind of a clap back against Senator Foreman in their own words.
Are you anticipating any potential seat flips or upsets during this election cycle?
We have 4 traditionally kind of battleground districts. Currently, District 6, encompassing Moscow, Lapwai, parts of Lewiston, and a few other towns. All of those seats are held by Republicans, including Senator Dan Foreman. And so we don't hold any seats currently, but we held Foreman's seat last cycle. So it's definitely, those are gettable races for us. And then we have 3 other districts where we have 2 out of the 3 seats in each of those districts. And we want that last seat in all of those districts. And this is important not only for policy. We're looking at the launch scholarships that will get repealed if we don't elect enough Democrats. I'm hearing there's a stronger effort than ever to repeal Medicaid expansion, and they think they're going to be able to get it done. And then, of course, there's the voucher debate, which is muddling all of the water so terribly. And it, I think, is also part of the reason that we didn't do as well 2 years ago, because we have these out-of-state billionaires with a voucher agenda. And they are attacking our Democratic candidates with just these nonsense ads. And so we do not have spare funds to start subsidizing private, religious, online for-profit schools. We can't subsidize this a secondary system when we're not doing right by the public schools we have. So those are the policies that are in play. But what's also at risk, and that what kind of the insiders are looking at really closely, is who controls the Senate. With Senate Pro Tem Chuck Winder losing in his primary, that race is wide open. We've got a big risk that we will have an extreme leadership in the Senate to match what we've had in the House for a while, is extreme leadership over there. And I mean, the laws we're getting today are already extreme, and unfortunately it can get worse. And so that's why it's so important that, candidates like Rick Just win re-election District 15. We need Julia Parker, a Moscow City Councilwoman and nurse, to beat Dan Foreman in that Senate race, and then we need our Democratic senators to get reelected elsewhere.
And this is a general election year. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts about this, because they can, the general election can have a big impact on local races. Do you think having Vice President Harris as the Democratic candidate will have an impact on down ballot elections in Idaho?
I do have the sense that there is enthusiasm on our side that we haven't seen in a while. And I think it's going to drive out people who might otherwise not be super plugged into politics. Maybe they're busy going to school and holding down a job, and there's no time in the schedule to go and buy the newspaper and find out what's going on. But they might see in their social media pop up what's happening with the presidential election. And I think the risks there of another Trump term are very motivating for women who have lost their reproductive rights here, to young people who care about climate change. I think we're going to have more enthusiasm than we typically see on our side.
On the flip side, former President Trump is also running, and I hope this isn't a spoiler, he will probably take Idaho. Do you worry that keeps some voters away, that the idea that the presidential ticket in the state is already a foregone conclusion?
We do have a pattern in Idaho where Democrats usually don't do quite as well in presidential elections. And I don't know that it's quite so much that people think their vote doesn't matter, but I think there are voters on the Republican side who only come out in a Republican year and aren't as involved or engaged in what Idaho politics are doing. And then they, maybe blindly vote for all of the Republicans. And then we get some bad candidates. We have, Dan Foreman, we spoke about, has no business holding public office with the way he behaves and treats people. And yet, it's part of kind of the closed Republican primary favoring the most extreme candidate. He pops up, and now he gets to serve in a legislature. We have Senator Phil Hart, who's a known tax cheat, who stole lumber from lands where we use those earnings to support our public schools. We just have we have candidates who have no business being in office. And I think that's in part to people not paying attention to those down ballot races and really learning about who those candidates are.
And another hot topic, you mentioned the primaries and the primary system in Idaho, and that's how we have a lot of the candidates that we have. A hot issue is Proposition 1. How do you think that will impact the legislative races for Idaho Democrats?
I do think there will be, because we have a strong volunteer-driven, citizen-led ballot initiative, I do think that will also drive turnout. Like we saw during the Medicaid expansion vote in 2018, Democrats did better. I think because there were just more doors were being knocked, more people were aware of the election and what was at stake. I think we're going to see that same energy with Prop 1, and hopefully will improve turnout. And I think that will help us do better.
And I'm really curious because Idaho is a red state, quite a red state. That's not going to maybe change overnight. But one way to potentially counter the supermajority stronghold is building relationships with groups that have been harmed or disenfranchised by the political establishment. How is the state Democratic Party working to build and maintain relationships among some of these groups, like BIPOC or queer voters, for instance?
Yeah, so we have a newly reinvigorated queer caucus that's getting more and more active. you will see, which I think we didn't do in part because we didn't have the resources, but you'll see Democrats sponsoring pride celebrations all across the state. This is just what we do now. We show up, we express our support, and register voters and get them engaged. We have been running for a couple years now free citizenship classes led by someone who is fluent in Spanish and English, and we advertise those on Spanish radio so that immigrants who are close to that stage of taking their citizenship test and going through that process can get some education, some help, because it can be a intimidating thing. But we want to show our commitment to assisting a community in something that they see as a need.
And looking forward, what are the Democratic Party goals heading into the 2025 legislative session?
There's a lot of defense to play when it comes to, protecting our Medicaid program, defending it against cuts, and defending it against repeal of Medicaid expansion, and making sure that we can keep the Launch Scholarship program intact. Last year, Idaho's graduating seniors they were the first class of kids who got to get those scholarships. I met one of them, I think 2 days ago when I was knocking doors. A young man was like, "Oh, I'm getting that, and it's great." Because even though we passed it in 2022, and then in 2023, all we had to do was fund it, and kids had already received their award letters. They were already excited to pursue these opportunities. And even then, it took Democrats to pass that budget. The second round of the application just opened up. Idaho's high school seniors are applying again this fall, and so we've got to follow through on that commitment. And then, as always, we're always trying to defend against deep revenue cuts in these tight budget times that only favor the wealthy and corporations, and that's not right.
Lauren, thank you so much. I know we covered a lot of ground, and this is a very hectic and busy time of year for you. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast and really go over all of these topics that, people are asking about, wondering about.
My pleasure completely. I'd come back anytime.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, check out our Hey Boise newsletter for even more election guides. We'll be back tomorrow morning around 6:30 a.m. with breaking election results. You won't want to miss it.